Going on, everyone? John Matrix here. We're going to be jumping back into the Red Tape series here today with the Exploring series. We're going to be jumping into SCP-6000, Serpent, the Moose, and the Wanderer's Library. Links will be down below in the description as always. To the original video without my commentary and reaction, and to the Exploring series channel. Please do me a favor, if you enjoy this video of his, be sure to go over there and give it a like, and be sure to hit that sub button on his channel if you have not done so already. Makes a lot of great content in the SCP universe. Definitely deserves the love and support. If you'd like to join us when I'm doing these reactions live, as I am right now with my YouTube members, there's a join button underneath the video. You can check out all the things that I offer for my memberships. And if you do me a favor, consider hitting the like and the sub button on this video. Lets me and the YouTube algorithm know that you enjoy this kind of content and you want to see more. So with all that said, we're just going to jump into the video here. Again, this is SCP-6000, the Serpent, the Moose, and the Wanderer's Library. Monitor on. Let's go.
SCP-6000, the Serpent, the Moose, and the Wanderer's Library.
It's a little quiet.
Aside from the community, the artwork, the games, the videos, and the memes, stories are the heart of the SCP universe.
Very much so.
Every single article on the site tells some form of story, from something as simple as a rock that makes you procrastinate to the most expansive of connected canons. Stories and the authors who create them are what keep us coming back to the universe, and it's the nature of these stories that SCP-6000 is about. Specifically, their endings. Let's take a look.
I mean, we've only done one other video in this Red Tape series, but if the theme of this video is the endings, I wonder if that's what the theme of Red Tape is going to be kind of about like death and things ending, or maybe even like cycles ending and renewing or something. Like, I don't know.
SCP-6000 has of course been classified by order of the Overseer Council, and we see that the person currently accessing the file is an individual named Director Moose. Now,
from the last video, the O5 Council is gone, so like I would think that would change all of these access things, right?
This would be Director Tilda Moose, the director of Site-19 and co-director of Site-17. She's notably a Type Blue individual, as codenamed by the GOC, meaning that she's capable of using thaumatology, or magic, and she's also a former member of the Serpent's Hand.
Right.
A group.
I was gonna say, like, yeah, that's what I thought. I thought she was the leader at one point in time, but I could be mistaken. I could be confusing her with someone else, but I definitely thought she was originally a member of the Serpent's Hand that had left.
Opposed to the SCP Foundation that's dedicated to the release and normalization of the anomalous. It's very rare for a Serpent's Hand member to leave and join the Foundation, and even more rare for one of them to rise as highly as Tilda has. We're then informed by the Foundation's Records Administration that when the SCP-6000 slot was first automatically pre-generated as an empty placeholder, 2 files were found attached to it, with no file history available. The O5 Council has left the files unaltered, just in case, but...
You know, that would actually, that tangent. An interesting idea for an SCP story. What if there is just like a slot? You know, like when you go to the bank, the little suction tubes, you put your stuff in and it goes up. What if there's like something like that where it just like comes down and all of a sudden that's just how like new SCP files come in. And as those new files get read, then that's how new SCP anomalies are then created in the universe, because the author has submitted them to the wiki, you know, yada, yada, you know, pataphysics, whatever. I don't know. Just where my brain went when he talked about that. Anyway.
But none of the following events have occurred, and the location listed for SCP-6000 contains nothing of note.
Yeah.
The first file is linked to a Project Fusilad, seemingly an SCP Foundation and Global Occult Coalition joint operation. SCP-6000 itself is described as a massive dimensional extrusion located in the Amazon rainforest in Brazil. It represents the largest way, or extra-dimensional portal, ever encountered by the Foundation, as it currently...
And it's in the Amazon? Isn't that where the Children of the Night are? Aren't they down in South America, if I'm not mistaken?
measures 19 kilometers across. Its presence is also affecting a much larger area around it, changing the plant and animal life in the area, and the way is continuing to expand at an unstable rate.
We got the Cicatrix Maledictum here, whatever it's called, from 40K, actually opening up here in the SCP universe. We got portals, demons are about to start pouring out. I can see it.
SCP-6000 connects our reality with that of the Wanderer's Library, an extra-dimensional location consisting of seemingly an infinitely large library. Supposedly, the library contains all knowledge, past, present, and future, with a specific focus on thaumaturgy and magic. It's home to a number of entities referred to as librarians, ranging in different sizes and shapes, and those that break the rules of the library are transformed into these entities in order to work off their debt. The Serpent's Hand used the library as a form of home base, since the library is welcoming of those that wish to embrace the anomalous. Thus, the library was originally barred to groups such as the Foundation or the GOC, but recently this ban has been relaxed somewhat. Director Moose, being a former member of the Hand, had spent a great deal of time inside of the library, but she hasn't returned since joining the Foundation. SCP-6000...
We got into that story a little bit in the previous video too, where she had like great regret about leaving, essentially. Like, I believe I'm trying to figure out how I want to word this. Was happy, I guess, with the choice to leave and join the Foundation for whatever her reasons were, but her regret about never being able to go back to the library eventually overwhelmed and consumed her, kind of a situation, you know?
Was discovered in December of 2030, when an anomaly resembling an iridescent rip in space, around a half a kilometer long, appeared in the Amazon rainforest. It was immediately evident that it was a way leading to the library, but it was the largest ever encountered and was already changing nearby plants and animals.
This is the way.
A 3-man reconnaissance team was sent in, but weren't heard from again, so an MTF was sent in afterwards. The team found the others' equipment and supplies, with tracks.
Standard procedures: send in the D-class first, let them die, and then send the MTFs in after them.
Leading towards the way. While searching for the missing team, they found the corpses of 12 individuals dressed in robes, surrounding a thaumaturgic ritual circle. In the center of the circle was a large, snake-like entity, ending with the head and upper body of a female human. The entity was in a comatose state.
Are we getting some Yuan T here? Are we getting some D&D in the SCP universe?
So it was quickly airlifted to a nearby Foundation facility. A detachment of the MTF was sent in to further investigate the portal to the library, accompanied by Tilda Moose, due to her extensive experience with ways, the library, and the Serpent's Hand. As they enter into the area around the way, they note sounds coming from ahead, and the air around them seems to shimmer like an oil slick. They then notice a tree trunk that has been transfigured into a bookshelf, although no books are present, and they see other trees nearby that are actively undergoing the same process.
So it's like the library is starting to like merge with our reality, right? Like the library is like coming into our reality in a certain way. Interesting.
As they pass over a ridge, they then see that a large swath of the forest has completely disappeared and been replaced with a cut in space, leading into an empty wing of the Wanderer's Library. Tilda remarks that she's never seen empty bookshelves in the library,
Yeah,
and the
that'd be
rest of
odd.
the team are instructed to enter in while Tilda stays behind to avoid upsetting the librarians.
I mean, I would think that could have like massive implications, right? Because like the Wanderer's Library is supposed to be like the repository of all knowledge of everything in existence. So if there's bookshelves in the library that are empty, what does that mean? Does that mean things that are in existence are being destroyed, being removed from existence? Are new things coming into existence? You know, is like a new universe starting to be created in our universe, and this is like the precursor to it? Is like, you know, a whole new high toth cycle thing? Like, you know, there could be like major implications from this, right? I think it might be some of the is not things here, empty book. Yeah, I mean that could be too. That's also what I was thinking of. Is this something where everything that isn't is somehow now entering into our reality? I mean, yeah, there's a lot of implications from this.
As they approach the
It could also just be nothing. You know, it could just be the fact that the library is expanding into our universe and these shelves are just being created for some reason.
edge of the library, one of the team kicks at the dirt on the ground, revealing hardwood floor underneath. They step in, and since all members of the team have had some experience in the library, they note that it feels different than normal, realizing that it's an unfinished section with no roof and no varnish on the shelves. They're interrupted by the arrival of a massive red millipede, a local denizen. They try calling out to it, but it screeches and hisses at them, and a voice from elsewhere says that it sees their intentions, and they should leave. Several librarian entities in the form of human arachnids crawl over the tops of nearby shelves at this point, notably wearing the uniforms of the reconnaissance team.
Okay. I was going to say, right, like, is this a version of the Wanderer's Library from another universe or dimension, right? Because, you know, there have been other stories of, like, sapient bugs and arachnids in other universes, right? So, like, I was wondering if potentially another version of the Wanderer's Library from there was somehow merging with ours. But it sounds more like the initial team that got in there has been turned into insects.
The team is not sure what's happening, as they didn't break any rules, but they begin to flee regardless.
Yeah, I
A
would
librarian tackles one of the team to the ground, and Tilda fires her handgun at the entities from outside of the library. Another of the team rushes back to aid the grabbed member, punching the librarian in the face, but they're both swarmed by multiple other librarians.
Now we got aliens going on here, you know, we got xenomorphs coming in, acid for blood everywhere. This is terrifying.
They're left behind as two attack helicopters swoop in to...
That's what I was thinking at the beginning of this, right? Like, how does this connect with the Wandsmen? Right? If it even does.
lay down suppressive fire and drop ropes for Tilda and the remaining team member. Both the sudden, unprovoked hostility from the library, as well as the transformation of the reconnaissance team into librarians despite no rules being broken, prompted an emergency council meeting to decide what to do. Project Fusilad was instituted to contain and mitigate the effects of the Way, and to determine the changing situation with the library. A perimeter was created around the Way to keep out wildlife and travelers. The nearby Foundation facility was redirected to focus on containing SCP-6000, and an arrest order was put out for all known cells of the Serpent's hand. Shortly after this, the snake-like entity woke up during an examination by medical personnel, immediately attacking them.
Of course.
It was quickly disabled by security guards, and while in containment, it repeatedly referenced the library and the Serpent's hand, so Tilda was brought in to perform some interviews. The entity...
Yeah, I mean, right, like, wouldn't you think Tilda would be like the number one person you'd be talking to in this situation? Because obviously she's from the Serpent's hand. Would she have any reference of what's happening, knowledge? Because, I mean, like, it's the repository of all knowledge in existence. Like, it obviously seems like some kind of ritual has been done here. And being that she was at one point in time, I believe, even the leader of the Serpent's Hand, you would think she would have some kind of knowledge of what's happened, what's going on, you know?
He refers to Tilda as a jailer, so... The entity refers to Tilda as a jailer, so she assumes that means that it's a member of the Serpent's Hand. The entity responds that she can't remember if she is or isn't. All she remembers is floating in a void, dreaming, sitting under an apple tree, hearing something whisper stories into her ear, and then...
Are we getting into the Garden of Eden stuff here? Sitting under an apple tree? Is this supposed to be Eve?
Waking up here. Tilda asks if she remembers how she became this form, and after looking at herself in a mirror, she learns that her form has changed into this snake creature. She says that the voice did say that it would mold her into its image, and when Tilda asks her about the voice, she says that it was with her the entire time she was dreaming, dangling from the branches of the tree,
right, yeah,
murmuring tales and stories and myths, including stories about the Foundation, the GOC, and the library itself.
It seems like this might have some kind of references. Like, again, this feels like kind of Adam and Eve stuff. The apple tree, you know, this could be Eve. The voice could have been the serpent. Maybe the serpent, because there's two serpents, right? There's the serpent of everything that is, and then there's supposed to be the invisible serpent of everything that isn't, right? So maybe the everything that isn't serpent is the one that tempted her to do certain things and has been whispering to her and has performed this ritual. And so, yeah, maybe this is the everything that isn't library coming into our reality now. Interesting.
Tilda reveals to her that she's been into the library many times and asks what she knows about
yeah, exactly. Exactly, yeah, SCP-3000.
The way in the Amazon. The entity agrees to trade a story for a story, as her mind is bursting with stories, but the only way to know a story is to tell it. She asks Tilda to tell her the story of her last time in the library, to help her remember what the library was like. Tilda says that it was around 15 years ago, and her relationship with the Serpent's Hand was on the rocks. She managed to use some magical rituals to get into a forbidden section of the library known as the 5 Archives, where new librarians are made. While there, she took books, maps of ways, and various lists that would aid the Foundation against the library, and then left, freely admitting to betraying the library. The entity asks her to...
It's interesting that she would be able to get away with that to begin with, right? Like, even if she's the head of the Serpent's library, to my understanding, the librarians that are made there are the guardians of the library, and they know everything that's happening in the library. So wouldn't they then know that she's taking things that she's not supposed to and would have intervened before she would have even been able to get out of there? Now, I mean, obviously, she has... you know, magical means and, you know, thaumaturgical spells and whatnot, so maybe she used something to mask herself or whatever, but you would think it would be something along those lines, you know? But yeah, I wonder what this forbidden information is. And again, this is feeling, again, kind of biblical references, forbidden fruit, forbidden knowledge, etc.
Describe the library to her. And Tilda says that hopefully she already knows on some level, as describing it to someone who hasn't seen it is practically impossible. It's utterly alien, foreign, and beyond the cusp of understanding, describing it as the center of the universe. She says that it's infinite in size, but the entity corrects her and says that it's impossibly large, as it's eternally expanding as new stories are written and new knowledge is found.
I mean, the Wanderer's Library is just the SCP Wiki. New stories get added, it expands. There we go.
It consumes dead stories that have ended and turns them into shelves for other stories. The entity's story to tell is about a little girl who woke up and found that she could spin fire. She lit toys and candles on fire until men with guns kicked down her door and tried to take her away. She then learned that she could also light people on fire, but it was far less fun. She ran and ran until she met some people, street witches and miracle makers, who were just like her. They allowed her to enter a world where she could be herself without fear of reprisal, the library. She proceeded to walk among the shelves and read every single story she wanted, but she found a problem in that all of the stories ended, and she continued to wonder what happened after the stories ended. Tilda says that she can relate, but asks what it has to do with the situation here. The entity isn't sure, as she's still sorting through the stories, but she says to look for the Serpent's hand, as they helped that girl, so maybe they can help Tilda. This commenced Operation Black Star, a worldwide raid on all known Serpent's Hand cells, numbering 50...
Hell of an operation title. Black Star? Okay.
57 safe houses in total.
Damn, 57
All 57 of them
houses.
were found to be completely cleared out and empty, and in 30 of them, ways were present and still active, all of which led to the same section of the library as SCP-6000.
That would kind of make sense, though, right? Like, if there's changes going on with the library, you would think the Serpent's Hand would be the first people to have to deal with it and would probably be consolidating their forces into the library in order to figure out what's going on and maybe correct any kind of problem, or they're the ones that that could have started this. So again, they could have consolidated the forces in the library until these changes or whatever have finished.
As far as the Foundation can tell, the Serpent's Hand have completely abandoned the planet.
Yeah, I still haven't really gotten into the Black Moon stuff. I've only had some references, but yeah, the Black Moon Tau reference is one of them.
At this point, SCP-6000 had grown to 1 kilometer across, affecting an area 3 kilometers across. In a statement to the O5 Council, Tilda said that if the library has turned against humanity, the situation is going to be dire.
Very dire.
As it's a completely alien entity to us. The library is both humanity's greatest boon and its greatest threat.
Right.
Much of history has been influenced by people getting into the library and bringing back knowledge, but things could be pretty bad if the source of all knowledge in the universe turns against them.
Well, it seems like it's also kind of the source of creation, right? Because, like, as new things are made, they're made in the library and then they come into existence, you know? So it's like, and then the opposite also happens when things are destroyed or removed from existence. They get consumed in the library, and then those bookshelves become empty, as they stated. So, like, yeah, whatever the entity or source of the library is, you wouldn't want that to be your enemy. Yeah.
Unfortunately, the Foundation is having some trouble in trying to neutralize SCP-6000. Scranton reality anchors have had no effect on it, and even though ways normally dissipate after a few minutes, SCP-6000 has lasted for weeks and continues to grow. Additionally, none of the other ways they found leading into the library have dissipated either. The area around SCP-6000 is being actively changed into part of the library, with trees turning into shelves, writing appearing on leaves, animals being warped and transfigured. Since the area is continuing to expand, you can see how big of a problem this could be.
Yeah, I would think, right? Like, what else could you really do? Like, reality anchors aren't doing anything to contain its spread. So, like, I would feel like the only thing you'd really be able to do is like send Tilda Moose in with some like beefy MTF boys as like some kind of like a peace envoy or something like that to find out what's gone wrong and what needs to be done to correct the situation, right? If even at all.
They have some ideas of things to try, though. They attempt to use a bunch of flamethrowers to just burn the area down, but
I feel like that's
it
not
just
going to be a good
regenerates,
idea.
so that's a no-go. They then launch some missiles straight into the way, but all of them fail to detonate once passing into the library.
Again, I feel like that's a bad idea.
Finally, they turn...
I feel like doing anything that could be like represented as a hostile maneuver against the library would be a very bad idea. I feel like, again, your best bet would probably be to send Tilda in with like a heavy task force of, some, I don't know which ones you'd send in. I don't know what MTF team you would send in, but you'd want to send in, a task force, obviously, to try to make sure that she's protected, but she would need to go in and figure out what's going on and try to correct it, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, but I would think taking trying to do anything that would be considered attacking the library, I feel like would only make things worse at this.
something called the Atreus Array onto it.
Atreus?
A satellite-based reality anchoring system.
Are we in the never-ending story? Is that actually what's happening here? Is the library turning into the nothing?
They fire it at full...
It's actually Atreyu, not Atreus now that I think about it.
full power, but it does absolutely nothing. Tilda has another interview with the snake entity. She remembers being a young woman in a sect of the Hand, searching for the worship of knowledge in the library and outside of it. The mention of worship surprises Tilda, who says that the Serpent's Hand never really worshipped knowledge while she was with them. The entity says,
Wasn't there's some other kind of story about another woman who did some kind of ritual with the Serpent's Hand that caused some kind of issues, and I'm trying to remember it. Like it's like pinging something in my brain. It might have even had something to do with the Ouroboros cycle, but I can't remember off the top of my head. But it's something along these lines, right?
says that the Hand started out as a cult thousands of years ago called the Hand of the Serpent. They were a warrior cult dedicated to the worship of the serpent that created the library. The serpent is said to be knowledge incarnate and the spirit of learning, also known as the Naga, Jormungandr, and the biblical snake in the tree.
Yeah, Jormungandr, yeah.
The Hand were powerful, long-lived monks, but eventually they died out and left their teachings behind on why the spread of knowledge was the greatest honor possible and should be done at all possible cost. Many years later, people discovered these writings and called themselves the New Serpent's Hand, leaving behind the rituals of the cult, but continuing the worship of knowledge as an ideal. Tilda had no idea about the origins of the Serpent's Hand, and the entity...
I wonder if that belief in knowledge created the Wanderer's Library, right? Like, again, numerous times in SCP stories, right? Like, a lot of gods don't necessarily exist until humanity's belief in them becomes strong enough to essentially create them, right? So I wonder if that's what happened with this. Like, yeah, was the Wanderer's Library never really a thing until these monks started wanting to spread, the idea of knowledge and worshiping knowledge, and then the Serpent's Hand kind of took that to the next level. Interesting. It is known.
Entity had not been told by them either, but instead she heard this story from the Serpent
chicken
in
and
her
the egg,
dreams. Due to the ritual that was performed in the Amazon rainforest, she spoke to the Serpent that created the library. She heard stories of the Serpent singing the library into reality at the beginning of creation, and then retiring to slumber under its foundation. Tilda asks if she heard any stories about how to stop the library when it goes insane and out of control, since the library is supposed to remain completely neutral. The entity says that there are no stories of people stopping the library like that, because that's not how this story ends. Tilda tries to argue that endings can change, but the entity replies that endings are set in stone, but endings don't matter anyways. To an observer, Tilda's story ended when she betrayed the library and came to the Foundation, but it didn't, as she didn't cease to exist. Instead, she transitioned to a new narrative. Tilda responds that this isn't a narrative, it's her life. The entity says that the little girl from her story...
Well, I mean, we're getting into pataphysics there, because technically it is. Your life is just a story for us, so your narrative has changed because the authors changed it, yada yada. You know, okay.
Read and read until she realized that she had already solved her problem. Of course, all the stories ended, but there were always more stories, and there was no point in lamenting the inevitable when she could just move on. She says that all of the stories she sees...
That's true, right? It kind of makes me think of like The Witcher, right? Because The Witcher originally started as like a series of short stories that eventually then got popular and turned into longer novels with Geralt and everything that happened with him. So I wonder if that's how some of these books are in this, right? Like there's story arcs for people and they're kind of broken up into smaller short stories or whatever. And then, yeah, I don't know.
With the Foundation staring down the end of the world, they have the GOC on their side. Rivals allying themselves against a great threat. A fusillade of fire against a wall of trees. This remark by the entity led to an 0-5 vote to expand Project Fusilad and begin working with the Global Occult Coalition. The vote, of course, passed, because when you need something absolutely destroyed, who better to call? Not long after, a GOC strike team was sent into the Way to attempt to gain access to the library and ascertain the situation from the inside. The team soon enters the library through the Way, passing by the empty shelves and being unaccosted by librarians. They soon come across a lectern holding a single thin book with the words, "In Progress," embossed in...
Yeah, you would think the Wandsmen would have some vested interest in this, right? Like, where are they during all this?
...into it. They then hear the same hissing, unidentified voice from the last team's attempt, asking them why they are here. One of the team responds, slowly, that they're just following orders, and they're not sure why they're here. The voice responds that they wanted to see what the other side of the Fade was like.
Fade?
It says that it once saw a patron here consumed by questions about the library and how it worked, wondering how it was possible that the library was infinite.
It's interesting it's called the Fade, because that's what, in Dragon Age, that's what the realm of dreams and demons are, right? Like, when wizards or whatever enter a dream state, they can go into the Fade and accidentally bring demons that can possess them. So I think it's called the Fade.
Says that it's because of stories, as the library takes finished stories into its shelves and takes finished worlds into itself. It says that the members of the team are pure of heart, ordered by men who hate what is going to happen to their story, and they are welcome here. The signal then cuts out, followed by a rapid expansion of growth from the Way,
Yikes.
growing to nearly 3 kilometers in size in a matter of a couple hours. Even worse, several radio signals began broadcasting from SCP-6000, as well as all the ways they found in different Serpent's Hand safe houses. The signals all contain the same message, the hissing voice from the library repeating the exact coordinates of SCP-6000, as well as the phrase, "The garden is the Serpent's place." It, of course,
Okay, so that sounds like obviously a Garden of Eden reference. And again, like, I wonder, this makes me wonder what's happening with the Gate Guardian at this point too, right? Because this sounds almost like this is another entrance to the Garden of Eden that the Gate Guardian is essentially guarding, that was supposed to be off limits to people. Now, maybe that's a different section, right? Because this library could be part of the Garden of Eden, and it's just a specific part of it, and maybe, yeah, humans could have access to it, and where the Gate Guardian is could be something else that humanity is not supposed to have access to, or at least not until a certain time. You know what I mean? But it does make me wonder if there's some kind of connection, you know? We're the host of heaven, rank of angels, right? Yeah.
did not take long at all for the world to become aware of this, despite the Foundation's efforts to stop it.
And it's also interesting that it's inviting people there, it seems. You know, it seems like people... It's sending out a broadcast saying, hey, these are the coordinates. You're basically kind of welcome here. I wonder why. I wonder, yeah, I don't know.
Word began to spread of something strange happening in the Amazon. Official satellite photos of the area all showed nothing of note, but other footage, such as from wildlife observation cameras in the area, showed SCP-6000 in all its glory. A number of individuals began to try to reach the area on foot, an effort that was easily stopped by the Foundation, but word continued to spread. During this time, the way continued to rapidly expand to nearly 6 kilometers across, with no signs of stopping.
Wouldn't that also then technically make this a broken masquerade situation, right? Because it's sending out broadcast signals to an anomalous thing, and the Foundation isn't able to contain this. So, like, the word is out around the world that there's something going on in the Amazon rainforest, and footage from wildlife, you know, trail cams essentially is out there. I mean, I guess they could be played off, right? You know, as, you know, edited or whatever, you know, I don't know.
The other member of the MTF that escaped the initial encounter with SCP-6000 alongside Tilda ended up disappearing from his room one night. They found a thaumaturgic ritual circle drawn into the floor of his quarters, and footage showed a sudden burst of light appearing near SCP-6000 at the same time he disappeared.
Interesting.
He was then seen moving through the foliage and entering the library. He left a note behind, addressed to Tilda, explaining that when he first entered the library as part of a mission, he experienced something amazing, something well beyond what he thought was ever possible. He also thought it was a shame that they looked at something so magnificent and only worried about how it might hurt them. The librarians seem to only be harming people that try to stop the expansion, and he has no intention of doing that. He tells Tilda that this is the end of the story, and it isn't one where they somehow come up with a silver bullet to fix everything. The only thing he can do now is change how he feels about it, and he thinks that this is his happy ending. Tilda goes back.
I mean, it would make a kind of sense, right? Like, if the Wanderer's library is consuming the world, but it allows everyone to enter the library, essentially you don't really die, right? You just become a part of the library. And maybe the library is like terraforming the universe into something different, you know what I mean? Like, again, maybe it's the start of a new Hytos, but it's doing it in a different way. You know what I mean? So, I don't know. But it seems like going to the library is the way to go.
Back to the snake entity, who says that she told her right from the start that this isn't the kind of story where they find a way to fix everything. Tilda says that she's not going to just roll over and die, but the entity says that no one has died. Tilda is obviously confused about the situation, but the entity says that she can't explain it to her, comparing it to trying to scream into a book when the characters frustrate you. All you can do is watch it play out. Moose wants to know how it ends, and to know that she did everything she could to stop it, but the entity says that Tilda already knows how it ends, and denial doesn't fix anything.
Yeah.
She went to that...
It's like the universe is like collapsing from the inside out, you know, almost kind of not imploding, I guess, but like consuming itself from the library. I don't know. It's strange.
Ritual in the Amazon to know how her story ended, and she learned how this world's story ended, the two being one and the same. This story ends with two people sitting in a room talking before vanishing into thin air. She says that Tilda should be flattered, because even though she won't admit it, it's clear that she wants to see the library again. Tilda denies it, saying that the library screwed her long before she screwed it, and she leaves. SCP-6000 continues to expand, out to 13 kilometers in length, and the Foundation begins drafting plans for a broken masquerade scenario,
I feel like
in
that's
which
already
the
happened.
world becomes aware of anomalies. This ends the first file that was found on the Foundation's database, and leads into the second one. This file immediately informs us that containment of SCP-6000 has failed, and much of the Foundation has fled the planet. SCP-6000 now covers around 58% of the Earth's surface, and is still actively growing, with projections indicating that it will cover the planet within a few weeks.
I guess.
Nothing the Foundation or the GOC did slowed it down, and everything within its area is now considered lost, with Foundation and Fusilad personnel evacuating to extra-dimensional backup sites. They did recover an audio log from the Foundation facility near where 6000 started, before it was taken over by the anomaly. They had believed that all personnel had been evacuated beforehand, but later learned that Tilda had never boarded any of the evacuation helicopters. In the log, the snake entity tells Tilda that she shouldn't worry, as leaving this world is not as scary as it sounds. Tilda says that she's understating what's about to happen, as there's nothing natural about this, and they're sitting and watching the apocalypse with nothing to do about it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, man. I'm the kind of person, right, where, like, if the apocalypse is going to happen and there's literally nothing that can be done about it, give me, like, the best seat in the house so I can watch it. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, let me make some popcorn so I can sit down and see what's going to happen, I guess, because it's the last thing that I'm going to witness before whatever happens next. You know, either fades to black or, you know, whatever happens when we die. You know what I'm saying? So that's just how I would be.
The entity asks her if she thinks there's going to be anything after this. Tilda assumes she's referring to an afterlife, but she clarifies, asking her what she thinks will happen after the way covers the whole world. The entity says that Tilda knows on a logical level that the sun will eventually burn out one day, and we go through our lives knowing that the universe will have an ending. Tilda tries to argue that that's a natural ending, but the entity retorts that the slow, agonizing heat death of the universe is no more natural than what's happening now. She says that we live our lives knowing that nothing lasts forever, but we don't let knowing that there's an end ruin the story for us, because there are always more stories. Where there was once one story about a Foundation and their valiant stand down with the end of the world, Afterwards, there will be 1,000 million new stories and 1,000 million new worlds inside them. The library doesn't just connect to all the worlds, it is all the worlds, with every world a story and every story a world. It's not out of control, this is just the end of this world's story, and it's becoming part of the library. Tilda laments that nothing she or anyone could have done would have stopped this, but the entity says that the point was to make new stories where there was once nothing, and Tilda should be happy, as her story is going to be remembered forever. At this point, the file offers two branching responses from Tilda. One in which she asks what happens if she doesn't want any new stories, and another in which she asks if people will read about them. Both responses lead to the same answer, however, as the entity says that, like she's been telling her, Tilda doesn't get to pick the ending of the story. She only gets to pick how to take it, either sitting down and crying that the old stories are gone, or smiling and moving on to the next shelf. At that moment, the site was taken over by SCP-6000, and Tilda found herself inside of the library.
I wonder if that's almost kind of like the Serpent's, the Wanderer's library's, like, I guess, version of like heaven or hell, right? Like, think about it, right? Like, you're dead, you get to choose whether or not you want to be upset about it or move on to the next life, right? So, like, you can be upset that your life in this incarnation is over, and you can dwell on it and essentially put yourself in hell over it. Or you can say, okay, that life has ended. I have a chance to start a new life in new ways and experience new things. Let me be happy about it and move on to that. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's kind of what I'm getting from that. But whether you're an idealist or anything else, maybe. Yeah, you're going to take editing, but now, yeah.
The snake entity was gone, replaced with a young woman with the tattoo of a snake wrapped around a wrist on her face. She welcomes Tilda home and says that even though the library is the end of her story, it's not a bad thing, as she gets to move on to the next story. As Tilda looks around at the other people nearby, she notices some of them are members of the MTF and Project Fusilad, and even some of the O5 members. The girl tells Tilda that the end isn't death, even though she was stubbornly clinging to the idea for such a long time. Tilda asks if there will be new stories, with more worlds with the Foundation, and versions of her. The girl says that there already are, and pulls out a book titled SCP-6000, telling her to get to reading. Tilda looks around and says that she thinks this is it, her happy ending. There's definitely a lot to unpack here, not all of which I want to try and explain.
I mean, the story definitely plays on a lot of different levels, both in the pataphysical levels of, you know, stories that the authors for the SCP universe are making on the wiki, and old stories either being changed or removed for new stories, but then also getting into themes of life and death, and then also getting into biblical things, you know, with the Garden of Eden and the apple and the serpents, and, you know, is death just the end of a story, but then how do we deal with that? You know, do we dwell on it or move on to the next? There's definitely a lot here, but I guess I should save this till the very end.
The central focus of this article, as I said, is stories. The SCP universe is filled with stories, and since the Wanderer's Library is the source of all knowledge, and thus all stories, it is the center of their universe. All new stories, meaning different timelines, worlds, canons, scenarios, etc., come from the library. And so when those stories end, the library takes them back into itself.
Right.
The world in which SCP-6000 took place was a story, and it eventually came to an end, thus necessitating the library to take it back into its folds.
Yeah.
Tilda thought the whole time, like most of the Foundation, that this meant death for the people in the story. But a story doesn't have to end in death. She was able to re-enter the library, something she had secretly wanted for a long time, and was able to experience the multitude of stories featuring other worlds, other SCP Foundations, and other Tildas. The last section of the article links to 3 different pages. One, when Tilda asks if there will be other stories featuring her, links to the author Rounderhouse's SCP-001 proposal, Memento Mori, in which Tilda died trying to perform a ritual to re-enter the library. The second link, in which the girl tells Tilda to get to reading, links to the latest series of SCP articles, Series 7, which starts with SCP-6000. The final link is when Tilda mentions that this is her happy ending, and it links to the Wanderer's Library site. The Wanderer's Library is a sister site to the SCP Wiki, and features articles that tend to be more whimsical and fantastical in tone, mainly focused on creating a sense of wonder. Rounderhouse is an administrator of the Wanderer's Library, so this article is intended to be a love letter to both the library and the SCP universe. SCP-6000 isn't meant to be a hard-hitting apocalyptic tale that goes into great detail of how the world ended and what the Foundation did to desperately try to stop it. Instead, it's a piece about stories and how they inevitably come to an end, whether we want them to or not, and that there's always more stories to be had. We can't always pick how the story ends. We can only pick how to take it.
Indeed. Okay. Will we get a quote? No quote. Feels bad, man. I've already kind of given some of my thoughts on this. I mean, yeah, the story really gets into a lot of different heavy themes on a lot of different levels, both pataphysically in the SCP world, because, you know, her life is a story for us that was written by authors from our existence that can be altered and changed and end in the SCP universe below us pataphysically. But then also it gets into the ideas of, you know, life and death. Is life essentially that we live just the story, and when we die we have the opportunity to move on to a different story in a different reality with a different version of us, you know, etc. Or do we decide to sit in purgatory and dwell on it and create our own hell about, you know, and go over all the regrets and things that we could have done in this life, etc., etc. And then, of course, biblical references with serpents and Garden of Eden and the apple being the fruit of knowledge. I think one of the more interesting things from this, though, is the idea that potentially, you know, the Wanderer's Library was essentially a god created by monks whose belief was in knowledge. The idea that they believed that knowledge was something sacred and needed to be preserved and spread and shared, and then that belief became so powerful that it potentially created the Wanderer's Library, that then became the repository of all knowledge of everything in existence. That to me is a pretty interesting idea, and again goes into those themes of, you know, who and what are the real gods, you know what I'm saying? Like, you know, we as humans give our beliefs and worship that create the gods, that give them their power, but we're the ones that give them their power, so are we essentially not the gods ourselves, kind of a situation, you know? But fascinating story. Life is just a story, death is also a story, so is everything in the story. In other words, basically just create meaning. essentially, I mean, I feel like that essentially is what the purpose of life is to make your own purpose. You know, find your own purpose, find whatever it is you want to do with this life, and do with it what you can with the time that you have, because we truly don't know. Maybe there is something more after, maybe there's not. Maybe we do just fade to black and that's it. You know, who knows? So, but anyway, yeah, interesting story. So far, again, you know, this kind of had a loose connection to the previous story. This was more focused on Tilda Moose, who, again, in the previous, you know, video from Red Tape, died as one of the 03 or 05 council members, trying to get back to the Wanderer's Library. So in this story, she actually got her wish and was able to get back to the Wanderer's Library, but was unsure really of, you know, what that outcome meant. But it seems like essentially, yeah, she was able to move on to other versions of her and other stories and whatever, you know, in the end. So interesting. But yeah, that was SCP-6000, the Serpent, the Moose, and the Wanderer's Library from the Exploring series. Links will be down below, as always, in the description, to the original video without my commentary and reaction, and to the Exploring series channel. So please do me a favor, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to go over there to his channel, give it a like, give him a sub if you haven't already. He definitely deserves it, and he makes a lot of great content for the SCP universe, puts a lot of time and effort into his videos, and he deserves the love. If you'd like to join us when I do these reactions live, as I'm doing right now with my YouTube members, there's a join button underneath the video. You can check out all the various tiers and what you get for those tiers. You can get early access videos, priority kind of reaction requests, access to some members in the Discord channels, etc. Stuff like that. So if you've been around the channel for a while and decide you want to take your support to the next level, check all that stuff out. Do me a favor as well, consider leaving a like and a sub on this channel, as it helps me and the channel grow. It lets me and it lets the YouTube algorithm know that you enjoy these videos and this kind of content and you want to see more. Please do me a favor, consider doing that. It helps me out. Love you guys. Thank you guys for watching. Appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to hang out and watch the video all the way to the end here. Definitely means a lot. Hope you're all having yourselves a wonderful day. See you on the next one.